Our session chair and speaker, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan and Mr. Chetan Bhagat.
Welcome. And I must say, my in laws are very proud today because I'm married to a Tamilian, as many know, and they are big fans of yours. So they are the most happy that I'm meeting you. So, hello, mother in law, if you're watching this on TV. I have been following what you've been saying in articles, in interviews, even well before I was chairing this session. And since last 2 days, I'm obsessed. I've seen my YouTube is only recommending you now because I've seen every interview. You do have a lot of opinions. You were state minister in Tamil Nadu, but I think your voice is heard more than many union ministers also. It's true. It's true. And that is because of the power of your words. That's because of the power of your ideas. But I think because in a platform like this, it's good to challenge them. So we'll talk about federalism, but I want to just get right into it. You have a lot of views on the Modi government. A lot. Now, let me just play devil's advocate. They'll say, I mean, amongst the millions of people who do vote for the BJP and also the government itself will say, listen, you've given pride, you've given you national pride, you've given you Hindu pride, we've given you infrastructure, we're making highways, we made metros, we're making airports, we have schemes, Ujjwala, Ayush, we have schemes, we have lifted profile of India, G20, this, that. What is so wrong in that? I mean, what's so bad? I mean, can't you just like appreciate that what you're doing? And on the other hand, you find a lot of things wrong in the way the government is run, or at least you don't feel it's the best way to do things. How do you counter this? Like, pride is there, growth is there, everything is there. Now, life is good.
Pride may be there. I'm not sure growth is there. So let me put maybe 3 points. One, if you look back to 1990, I'm not talking about centuries, I'm talking about 30 plus years ago. India and China had roughly the same GDP per capita, right? Scaling for the population. There was what we call in the markets a global trade, which basically said almost all manufacturing could be done cheaply and efficiently and quickly in China. In return, China was making lots of profits. It was driving huge investment into its infrastructure, into its economy, as well as becoming the kind of reserve buyer of the world, buying all these dollars and bonds and euros and all this stuff. And they accelerated in a way that has made their per capita GDP about 3 times ours. Now, you can't get the same kind of discipline and focus and so forth in a democracy that you can get in a communist country which is effectively run by one party rule. I agree. But at some point, we should be seeing that kind of growth because that's what our demographics and our curve should look like. So the first concern I have is the opportunity cost, especially in the last 2-3 years after pandemic, when there is a global demand for investment locations, when there is a global demand for a trading partner to replace China, that we should be doing a lot more and could be doing a lot more. And it should show in the results. Pride is good, but it has to translate into actual improvement of quality of life for people before it's meaningful. Otherwise, it's just propaganda, right? Anybody can drive propaganda. Outcomes matter. So that's my first concern. My second concern is that I see the propaganda and the pride as a substitute. In a lot of places, we are seeing much, much worse outcomes than we should in terms of equity, inclusion, harmony. We're seeing social strife and so forth. And I'm almost, what can I say, afraid that this kind of pride is a substitute for, I can't give you better jobs, I can't give you a better life, but you can feel better because you're above this, in the hierarchy above somebody else, and this kind of disparity. And these are correlated problems because the more you have an unstable, the decision of one person or one party can change the rule of law or the rate of tax or the direction of investment or the allocation of coal blocks, the less likely that outside investors see this as a level playing field and less likely they're going to come. Both of us have been in the world of finance. The less likely they're going to come and invest in a place where they can't predict what path outcomes can take. So collectively, all of this together, I would say, Too much rhetoric, too much of it is divisive, and not enough delivery. I can encapsulate that in just one instance. A good friend of mine, Tamilian by birth, uh, expatriate for many years, runs one of the big institutions in the Bay Area. You may have known him, but I don't want to give his name. He came to Chennai recently after the visit of the Prime Minister to the US and the visit of the White House and all that stuff. And we were at a dinner. And he was telling me it felt so good, and we got the seat at the table, and we had a state dinner. And so I let him speak for about 5 or 8 minutes, and then I said, how many trades came out of it? How many deals came out of it? How many investments came out of it? How is that going to create more job opportunity? And how many young people are going to benefit? You tell me that, I get excited. He happens to come and make you in India as an expatriate feel happier and proud. That's okay, but that's not really enough excitement for me. I want to see that something concrete came out of it, extra 10 billion, extra 100 billion, 5 more companies, 3 more jobs, more free trade, something that results. So that's where I would say the gap is between me and most people who think that the government is doing a good job.
Okay, you yourself acknowledged just now in your argument only that China's per capita GDP went higher because if you have one party, you have one like certain structure in which you can just make decisions fast. It leads to higher per capita income, and now they are more than triple of ours. I think it's more like 4 or 5 times. But isn't that the opposite of the federalism you're arguing about? In a way, big reform, right? Big national reform, like GST, like some major FDI policy change, like any of these big reforms requires a certain national level authority, national level of decision making, which is needed. On one hand, you have batted vehemently for more federalism. There is federalism. It's not like we are not a federal state. You have batted for it so much. On the other hand, there is the question of national unity and unity in terms of policy making. When you talk of investors, if every state, there was a time where like companies were moving plants from Bengal to Gujarat, they're getting kicked out of one state, they're getting kicked out of another state, they're deciding all that is happening. Whereas if there is a national, I mean, our counter argument can be that at a certain level, we need to present one national policy. That may not be a bad thing.
I don't know, there's 3 or 4 questions there. So let's unpack that. Let me start with the beginning. The problem with the one decision making or one party rule is that the odds of getting it exactly right are exactly zero. So even if you take China, while they had decades of tremendous growth, now they're paying the price for it because they've got overbuilding, all their major companies are going bankrupt, they have this unofficial credit market that is collapsing, and there's going to be serious consequences and pain. And there was a lot of suppression of dissent and opinions in the process of getting there. So I, for one, am not saying I want to see growth at that cost. So let me be very clear. I'm not advocating that model. I'm saying I can explain some of the gap based on the fact that it's a different model. The second point, though, is that there is very little likelihood that there is a all-knowing, all-seeing authority. That's the reality of most human beings. We are limited individuals. The notion of democracy is that 1,000 voices should be heard. We should take inputs from everybody. And then we should try and figure out a policy. And then if it doesn't work, we should be able to calibrate, recalibrate, and readjust, right? Not because I say so, this is the only way going forward. There are certain things that should be done at a national level. Things like foreign trade, things like currency stability, things like international relations, things like regulating of interstate commerce. But if you're going to dictate things like social policy about who should get fed and who should get educated what, this is very, very difficult to do in any large country in the world. It doesn't happen in China, despite it being communist. They set macroeconomic policies at the Central Politburo. But the city of Shanghai gives out industrial permits, decides what the environmental rules are, runs its own police force, runs its own pollution control board. The city, I'm not talking about the state. Big banks like mine, I work for a large international bank, has to get licenses province by province. There is no pan-China banking license for an international bank. You have to get state by state. Go to the US, you go to even developed countries like Switzerland. The canton decides whether you can become a permanent resident or a citizen or not. That county, right? So all over the world, the notion of democracy is inextricably linked with the notion of self-determination. Move the power closer to the people, not 3 degrees separated. Who's going to decide how the water system should work, right? The water system should be decided by the local authority, the Corporation of Madurai. Then there's some things that should be decided by the state, some things that should be decided by the union. So of course there's a role for the union, but it cannot be all-knowing, all-seeing. I'm the father of the nation. I dictate how the rest of the country should work, especially in a country like India that is so diverse. You know better than me. The country is diverse not just because it was broken into states linguistically, not just because it has different people going back thousands of years, but in the last 50 years, forget the last 50 years, in the last 30 years, from liberalization till now, the gap between states has accelerated so dramatically. The per capita income of Tamil Nadu is 4 times that of Bihar. How is the same economic policy going to be valid for both of us? Right?
Yeah.
We have disparate outcomes, we have disparate problems, we need disparate solutions. It's very unlikely that one policy is going to suit everybody in this country.
What I actually had that question. Why is the South per capita income much higher? Are you guys just smarter?
No, no. Well, I don't think so. I was.
I mean, it's
at,
okay.
No, no. I was at a conclave in Bangalore over the weekend, and I was asked, "Is there a southern model of governance?"
Mm.
And I said, "I think there is, but if there is a southern model of governance, it's because it's a southern kind of culture and society, right? Because governance is not thrust upon us. Governance comes based on the people who elect us and what they expect us to deliver as elected officials." So what is it that makes a southern culture a bit different, right? And I think so I'll work backwards. We got better outcomes because we have different governance. We have different governance because we have a different society. And I can think of at least 3 components, and this is just, what I thought off the top of my head. One, over thousands of years, we have been a seafaring, outward-looking kind of society, right? From the Chola kingdom had reached all the way to Laos and Cambodia. So, and now in the Madurai Kiladi dig, we found Roman coins dating back to, a few hundred BC. So we had always been an international outlook kind of global perspective society, much unlike the people who are getting invaded all the time from the north and who are very defensive and, mine's mine and you stay on that side. More recently, about 100 years ago, when all of this was the Madras presidency, this was one of the few presidencies that was not a Congress government. It was a Justice Party government. And they advocated and legislated equal rights for women, compulsory education for all, elementary education back in 1921, communal reservation based on what percentage of your society, so that every community could have a judge and a collector and a police officer and a lawyer. So this kind of social inclusion and empowerment spread across what was then Madras presidency, which is much of South India, except the princely states. It started somewhere in Orissa, came down to Kanyakumari and went past Bangalore almost to Bombay. So I think that social justice, inclusion, empowerment of women, and if I had to pick one thing, I'd say empowerment of women, giving women equal rights relatively. I'm not saying it's perfect, but relatively equal rights and equal access was probably one of the driving factors. And then the third thing is what I said earlier. When we did liberalization, when we did globalization in 1990, that's when the gap really started to accelerate. Because what we had was the building blocks. We had the infrastructure to benefit from this liberalization and this opening up. We had the right mindset, we had the right education levels, we had a lot of English-speaking people, we had a lot of connectivity with diaspora who had emigrated from here, and we were able to leverage that liberalization and just accelerate up the curve. In the case of Chennai, in automobiles, in the case of Bangalore, in technology, and we were able to just climb and get to a different level. And the places that didn't have that kind of background, I think were not able to get that. That would be my, if I had to pick a few reasons, those would be my reasons.
Yeah, that's good. I think the North does have, and I genuinely mean that, a lot to learn from here. This is a question I'm going to ask my other panelists as well. It's my natural curiosity. The South is deeply religious. It's very religious, rituals, motifs, temples everywhere. Yet, Hindutva politics doesn't work as well as it does in the north, especially when religion has such so much meaning. Is it, what is your views on it? Is it something to do with because the incomes are higher, but then even in higher per capita income states in the north, it works quite well, some of them. Just what is your, why is it, why doesn't it work as well, or is it just a matter of time?
I want to quote something my grandfather said back in the 1920s or 30s. He said, many people conflate God and religion, right? A lot of things are done in the name of religion which are actually not compassionate, not humane, not thoughtful. And what if God and religion were the same, then attributing all those things back to God is actually blasphemous on God. So what I would say is we are believers. I'm a believer. Many of us are believers. In my constituency, if you go down a street, there are probably 10 temples on every street. Some of them are private, some of them are owned by the state because they were without a clear lineage of descendants. But belief in God doesn't mean putting somebody else down, doesn't mean that I have to be superior to somebody. So, in fact, Anna said it. Peraringer Anna, the founder of our party, former chief minister, he said, to the extent that a belief in God makes a human being want to live a better life, he fears or she fears that they are accountable to some other being and one day will have to pay, the price for their actions. It actually makes them better persons and more kind and gentle to their fellow human beings. And in that sense, it's not a bad thing. Belief can be a good thing if it makes them calmer, gentler, nicer. That, I think, is a South Indian model of belief. I don't think this politics of weaponizing religion or using religion to divide people is likely to take hold anytime soon here. Mostly because we have democratized religion. If you look back, at least in the Madras Presidency and Tamil Nadu, across all parties, I give equal credit to the Congress, to the Justice Party, DMK, ADMK. We have democratized religion and removed the kind of weaponizing features of it so that anybody can follow their faith in their own way without having to conflict with anybody else.
Okay, that's great. Do you think the four southern states, right? They are all very five. Oh yes, now five. Sorry, I'm my bad. Telangana and yes, have to be updated. Yes, five southern states. All the more now they are five. While they're all very different cultures, there is some commonality. One is, I think, higher per capita incomes, and second is they are all ignored by the north and the center more than some of the other states for various reasons, seats, what gets to power. But there is no central body. There's no, like, you have a G20 or a BRICS. There's no S5 or there's nothing which represents the common cause. Do you think there is room for something like that? Do you think something like that can actually make the voice stronger? Because there is, like, from the north, many people don't even know the differences in the various cultures, but there is a lot of difference, but there is still a lot of common elements which justifies having a block like this. What do you think?
Look, I think the higher per capita GDP is a direct result of a higher education level weighted average, which is a direct result of greater inclusion and social justice and a direct result of more empowerment of women. I think these are inextricably linked. If I had to pick one variable, I would say just compare the percentage of girls getting out of elementary school, then middle school, then high school, then getting into jobs, what age they get married, what age they have their first child. These are the variables that separate the South from the less developed parts, and surprisingly, even from a state like Gujarat, which is developed economically, but socially, these indicators are very bad. So then the question is, why have we not really thought about ourselves as a bloc? Because we are the same patriotic citizens as anybody else, and we were thinking of ourselves really as state to center relations. Incidentally, in my view, though I lived abroad for 30 years and I have not lived outside Tamil Nadu, so you have to take it with the limitations of my knowledge. But if you ask me to pick, in my memory, the four greatest federalists of all time in India in 75 years, Peraringer Anna, Kalaignar Karunanidhi, Miss Jayalalitha, and Thiru Narendra Modi, greatest federalist of all time, till he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. Till he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he was one of the greatest federalists of all time. Now, of course, a different story. So now I'm saying if federalism in terms of states' right is being kind of gutted and is being disemboweled, then maybe the states need to start thinking together about what is a common agenda. And I'm saying first all states compared to the union. Second, of course, those states that because of this, we have this real tragedy in our country, right? Like, let me give you the math of it. In every country, in every federal society, those that are better off will contribute more, and those that are less well off will get more from the central pot. It's what happens.
Goes with, yes.
But most places in the world, that contribution or redistribution, that's what we do with taxation, right? Within our state, we take more money from those who can pay, and we give it to those who cannot. But all those are supposed to bring people closer together. This kind of redistributive function, whether it's the union relative to the state relative to the districts, the state relative to individuals, the state relative to cities. But if you look at India for the last 25 years, particularly the last 5 finance commissions, the distributions have kept on getting worse and worse skewed. That is, the more they take from us and the less they give back, the richer we get. The more they give to the poorer states, the poorer they get on a relative basis. So it's like throwing money down a well. You're giving this redistribution. In America, it helps Montana and Missouri come up if you take it from New York and California. In China, if you take it from the coastal provinces, put it in the hinterland, it helps the hinterland come up. In India, we keep on sending the money and it doesn't do anything. In fact, it makes things worse. So now the question is, if you're going to go to real democracy, you have 2 basic problems. The first problem, most of us in the South are paying out a lot more, getting back a lot less, and it's on a trajectory that is going to become more and more problematic. The second problem, because we have frozen population-based delimitations for 50 years, starting first with the 42nd Amendment during emergency, then the 84th Amendment under Thiru Vajpayee's prime ministership, we are going to find ourselves in a situation in 26 where either we are going to now redistrict, in which case states like Tamil Nadu are going to lose, or Kerala, the South will probably lose like 20 or 30 MPs out of its already small pool because our populations have come much lower. And then the poorer, weaker parts of the country that are already getting the most money are going to get many more MPs. Or you're going to continue a situation where it's an uneven democracy where every 1.5 million people in Tamil Nadu or slightly less in Kerala have an MP, but every 2.1 million people in UP have an MP. Right? So neither of these is a good outcome. So at the end, I think history teaches us that when you get economic development, one of the things you should do is devolve powers, right? We did some of that right. Only after the 1990s, we got the Panchayati Raj Act. We created the 3rd tier of government. We started devolving powers. Since we came to office 2 years ago, after the 6th State Finance Commission, we've increased that devolution. We've made the funds go directly to the local bodies. So just as we say we want devolution from the union to us, we at the state need to devolve from us to the local bodies, because the accountability of elected officials is the highest at the local body. Right? A Madurai city councillor cannot escape their voters because they live in the same 10 streets. It's like 8,000 of them. I have 250,000 voters, right? If they really want to see me, it's going to be hard for me to see everybody in a year even. And my MP has 1.5 million voters. The odds of direct accountability is very low. In fact, I would say one of the reasons why the UK democracy, maybe not so now, but used to be so vibrant, is that the average MP has something like 50,000 voters.
Yep.
So you can hold them accountable, right? So the more you devolve power to those that can be held accountable, the more thriving a democracy you'll have, the less you'll have a problem with this kind of devolution, with this delimitation. If the union's only going to take care of defense and money management and foreign affairs and interstate trade and these kinds of things, surely all of us want the same thing. What does it matter if I have X MPs or X plus 5 MPs? All our interests are aligned across all states. If you start saying they get to decide how the money is split between the states, then it bothers me a lot if I'm going to have fewer MPs, right?
That's a good point. It's election season, so before I let you go, what does it look like here? There've been alliances, there've been broken alliances. You've probably been seeing the news. Uh, what do you, and not just for the South, even for the national politics, I think you're very eligible to comment on that. How, how do you think it's going to play out in here, in this state and in pan India? I know there's a lot of time left still, and I know you can, nobody can predict what will happen, but your current view, if it were to happen today.
I spent a lot of my career in the financial markets, right? And as you know, if there are 100 variables that drive price action or yield curves, at best you can look at 20. So it's a mug's game to try and predict outcomes. If you were that smart, you'd be much richer, both of us, than we are now. So I'm not going to make predictions. I'll just say it in a kind of positive way and in a kind of neutralizing equilibrium way. The positive way I'll say is at the end of the day, the voters are sophisticated enough, I think, about their self-interest. At least the more educated they are, the more sophisticated they are in making their choices. And I remember my own, we are all shaped or limited only by our experience. I can't imagine things beyond what I've read or seen or done, right? So in my experience, the first time I ran for MLA, I was an unknown face. I had a legacy, I had something. I won by 4% or something, but it was about a 5% margin to the state average for my party. I did what I thought was good work for 5 years. 5 years later, I won by 23 something percent, and it was about 15% or 18% better than my state average for my party. I believe that the work I did got me the result that I got. So I have this faith in the voter, at least the voter that I know in Tamil Nadu, that they are thoughtful, rational people who will make choices based on the information, the track record, and their perception of what is good for them. That's the positive way of looking at it. The kind of neutralizing equilibrium is, I mean, what does it matter what I think? The people get the government they elect and the government they deserve. Whatever they decide is the wisdom of the people. We just live with the consequences, however that affects us. So I'm not in the election prediction game. I'm relatively sanguine in my state that I think I know how the voters will act and how they will vote.
How do you think it's going to be?
The track record of the last few years gives me comfort. I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah. And how is the overall I don't know how to say it actually. INDIA alliance. No, you can't say alliance.
I'm a state politician. I don't opine on national politics. I'm not qualified to do so.
You just commented on the.
No, I can talk about the economy. I can talk about government policy. That's my day job. But if you ask me to make political predictions or analyses at a national level, I'm not equipped.
Okay, let's talk about the state level.
I mean, only because I don't know. I don't know what is in the mind of people in Bihar or Rajasthan or Jammu. Why should I talk about things I don't know?
Fair enough. Fair enough. What about over here? The AIDMK just broke off an alliance with the BJP. Why do you think that, was that a surprise to you? Why do you think that happened? And what, do you think it will have an impact on the elections? Are you able to answer that?
No, I mean, if I had a good answer, I'd give it to you. I don't. I mean, I must say I was a bit surprised because I can say from personal experience that if it hadn't been for the BJP, it's not clear to me the regime would have lasted 5 years after the passing of Ms. Jayalalitha. It was a very unstable regime. I was sitting in the assembly when a lot of funny things happened, when 11 people voted against the government, but contrary to the anti-defection law, they were never removed from the house. I can remember governors negotiating deals, all kinds of things that I didn't think were, ideal in a democracy happened. And therefore I assumed and thought that people who had benefited would stay with the people who had given them the benefit. So I was a bit surprised, but and then who am I? Politics makes for strange bedfellows. Everything changes all the time.
Yeah, I know you have a flight, and thank you for your wonderful insights. And you've been a little diplomatic in terms of predicting election.
Maybe I'm finally growing up. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't. Okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot more we could have discussed, but you have to go catch a flight to Madurai, to your constituency, and I don't want to hold you. Thank you so much for your time and your great insights into politics, economy, and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much.